Welcome to Adults Only Comedy Berlin. Today we have Dion Owen.
That's me.
That's you.
That's me.
You're here. You're back in Berlin.
I'm back in Berlin. It's hard to leave every time. It's like a lovely lover who you have feelings for, but it never quite works out.
I've
But
got
one
lots of
day I
those.
dream. I know, that's the rumor. It might be fact now.
I think it's fact. Because we met for the first time before the pandemic.
2018, I think.
Yeah, that was 2018. Shit.
Yeah.
Or was it 2019?
I came through twice. I think we met the first time through
Okay.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Mr. Gutierrez. And we had a viewing of Bill Burr's Tiger
Oh, yeah, we
special
watched
at
that
my
with
apartment.
Vidura.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Because
That
that
was
Paper
fun.
Tiger special, I was super impressed with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were chilling at my place. And we also had the Spanish comedian through as well. She was also with us.
Yeah.
Forgotten. Lovely. Lucy. Anyway. So it's been a long time. So you're back. You spent the whole pandemic in Canada?
In Canada. The funny part was I had a return ticket to here, but I got back into Canada early March, did a couple shows, and then everything locked down. So like everybody, I just stayed put, but it worked out pretty well because it was the first year that comedy was my primary income. So I got to claim government subsidies for like 2 years. It was amazing.
Oh my God. That's beautiful timing.
Yeah, it was quite good.
So 2020 was the year that you first went full-time comic.
Yeah, I had been doing it before. I work as a bike mechanic, so that often will be a good substitute for income.
Yeah.
But then, sort of the 2019, 2020, comedy was my only income, really. And then a pandemic hit, and so I got to claim that I was a comedian.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, I'm in my second month of being full-time, like no other work, just comedy. So
It's scary, but fun.
it would have been scary. Like I was planning to do it regardless of this new job that I got, but with this new job, there's no fear because like 1 month of work in this new job, and I'm good for like three months.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, those good chunks of income. You're like, oh, rent's paid for months.
Yeah, for months. Like
Yeah.
actually, if I did the math, I think one month of work of this new job would cover my rent for like maybe 6 months.
Oh, that's perfect. So I'm trying to find a similar scheme, but it's easier said than done.
Yeah, this was pure luck, and I'm really grateful. And let's see how it goes. But yeah, it's I was prepared with just like show income to go full-time comedy anyway.
Yeah.
And then this beautiful nugget of chance, birthed itself. And so I think when this job finishes, hopefully something comes and takes its place, but hopefully by that point I'll still be fine with shows and blah.
Yeah, the audience is here. Like, if you're a good showrunner and a good comic, it seems like it's viable to eke out a living here. Which
Totally.
is pretty sweet.
Yeah. And also, like, by the way, just clarifying that whole, I can pay my rent for 6 months. My rent is also very low.
Yeah, you got the old lease, baby.
I just live in the ghetto. Like, I live in like a hut in the woods, but that hut is actually like this little apartment in this complex that was used to film a TV series about like drug dealers in Berlin, and it's like immigrant, crazy old German vibe. Like it's
Sounds like the perfect place for Anna's Den.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I know.
It's not the same place you were the time I visited. though.
No. That was a share house, and that home situation ended very badly in the pandemic.
No.
Yeah.
Spurned lovers or just regular?
It was one housemate moved out, and then we got this new housemate in, and I was really close with the housemate that stayed, and this new housemate just ended up created this whole horrible sort of bad dynamic, and I ended up not wanting to be there anymore.
I apologize for doing that as well.
What do you mean?
I was just acting like I was the person who were like, we let you into our home, a stray cat, and you destroyed it.
Destroyed it.
It's funny because I have a shared place in Montreal, and like one bad roommate fucks everything up.
Everything.
It's so crazy that it just takes one person. Like I had a couple times where I was living with 3 close friends in this 4-bedroom, and it was the best. We'd get up at like 10 and have coffee from like 10 to like 4 p.m. and then go do shows, and it was lovely. But you have one weirdo in there, and you're not comfortable at home, and then everything falls apart.
Totally. And that's why I live by myself now. After that, I was just like, I cannot. I lived with a comedian, Alex Upatov, for a while. And he rescued me basically. Like when that share house situation was going bad, I was like, and he was like, you could come and stay in my spare room. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And so I just was able to escape. And that was this, warm, living with a comedian is great. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it can be a little, like, it can also be, comedians are weird as well. And I love us, but like, it was the best. It was just so fucking great. And then it was like, no, but I still want to live by myself so that nothing can ever shake my refuge. Like,
the solitude of home is so vital.
My God.
If home is ever, you have to always be comfortable there. On a funny note, as you get older, home changes a lot. So I've kind of I'm trying to decide
How old are you?
I'm 36 now, so I'm getting up
we're
there,
the
but not
same age.
we're the same age. So I feel like because I remember I went and visited my family on Vancouver Island, and one of my aunts was like, "Oh, welcome home," and I was like, "Oh, I don't know if this is home anymore." And I've sort of come to the conclusion that I think home is the place you're the most comfortable pooping. I feel like that's like, if you're like, I could have a half-hour poop here, you're like, this is good, we're safe here.
I'm pretty comfortable pooping anywhere, I gotta be honest.
So everywhere's home for you then, according to my silly motto.
Yeah, I think
Where's home for you then? It's home here is now?
Home is Berlin. Yeah. I think that would hurt my family hearing that, but I've said it for a long time actually.
Yeah.
Like, going back to Australia, I say like, going home, but it's not really home. It's going back to my like old home city. It's not home. It doesn't feel like
I know that
home.
exact same thing where it's like you're haunted by the ghosts of your past, and it's kind of comfortable, but yet you're like, oh, this isn't me anymore. Yeah. And hard to say. So fortunately, your family probably doesn't listen to the podcast, so they may not know, or maybe they do.
The ones that have don't anymore and have blocked me.
Oh, dark.
Dark, yeah. Like that. You were at the show on whatever last week, the Would You Rather, and the Would You Rather poop every time you orgasm, or have a 5-minute conversation with your dad every time you pee. Yeah, I was like, I'll take the conversation with my dad because he won't talk to me anymore, and I would love that. And
I'm sorry, that's a hard one.
It is a hard one. Maybe that's an interesting topic because it's also reared its head again. And it was also part of the breaking down of that share house that I had was my comedy. And when people are in my inner circle, they will become part of the comedy.
Oh, for sure. I've had a number of people come through my life and they're like, oh, you're going to be a joke now? And like some of them, you're not interesting enough to be a joke.
That's what I usually say.
Yeah, you got to be cool and then you'll get in there. Yeah.
Or you got to be a total fucking dick.
Oh, and then, fucking basket case.
Yeah. It's like, basically, I'm not going to write jokes about anyone unless they behave badly with me. And even then, like, but also like on the podcast, so a podcast is very different to comedy. So written material, they're jokes and, whatever. Whereas when you share your story on a podcast, it's, it can feel really exposing for people. I understand that. But at the same time, it's like, it's a tricky thing because it's like, this is where people intersect in my life. It's my story, but it's not about exposing private things of their life. Yeah. But our shared story is my life. So
it's we'll dig into this a bit, I guess, because that's heavy stuff. I hope you're able to reconnect with your dad, but I know that it can be very challenging. Because like for example, I lost my dad in 2021. He had a heart attack out of nowhere, and we were super close. So that's been a big challenge, and that
must have been hard.
The grief is the one good thing about grief is that it's very painful. But beforehand, if somebody had lost somebody, I'd be like, oh, sorry, I gotta go away now. But once you're forced to deal with grief, sit in it, be there head on. I feel much more helpful to my friends now. So whenever I know friends are going through grief, I will often reach out and be like, how you doing? I'm here. Because if you've experienced it, you actually have some wisdom of how to grieve and survive it. It's funny because in reflection, I made fun of my dad quite a bit in my sets because he was absolutely wonderful, but he was a very silly, strange person. And so it's hard. And I veer away. I had like 15 minutes of material about him, and I haven't really done much of it at all because it doesn't feel it feels weird now. And I remember I had some good recordings and I didn't want him to listen to them because there was me making fun of him and I didn't want him to have his feelings hurt. And then I have heard some people, which is quite dark, but that they're like, once people have died, they're like, oh, now I can talk about anything because I know that I can't hurt their feelings.
Yeah, that's one angle. But then it's also like how you feel with the respect of their their presence in your life, and if you feel okay. Like I've got a joke that I talk, and it's really important to me, and it can be the hardest joke to do if like an audience isn't listening, or if you get heckled during it. But I've got this bit about an ex-boyfriend that committed suicide, and it's really important to me, and I feel like it you know, doing that joke, it really like keeps his memory, you know, living on. And it's like, and it's a really important thing for, I think, other people to hear when people commit suicide. And it's a but it like,
it's hard to do in a 7-minute set to be like, hey, we're gonna deal with gruesome shit.
And I'm so glad that I don't do it in 7-minute sets anymore. It's in my hour, but like developing that joke was rough.
Well, it's really hard because the really good stuff, and when you're having shorter sets, you can't get into any heavy. It's harder to get into heavy material or long stuff. Just on the quick note, I always like to share this. I'm very sorry about your you going through that. Some wise stuff I was told by a person who also tried to commit suicide but is still around is we all get fucking sad. Life is hard, but if you ever 'cause the sort of classic thing is you're always, if you're like driving in your car, you're like, I could just swerve and then I don't have to do this anymore. Or there's a train coming, I can just jump and then it's over. So we all, I think, have a bit of that impetus in our brain. But if you're ever planning out how you'll do it, then you really have to reach out, because that's when you're in the stages of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do in order to kill myself.
Have you?
Sorry?
Have you planned out how you commit suicide?
No, so I'm doing okay. I definitely battle a bit of like manic depressive, and depending on like if I'm exercising and meditating and doing well, I don't get those extreme lows. But I definitely get those days where I'm like, I don't want to do this again. I got to do things. So I very
like,
fortunately,
I'm just tired. That feeling.
So I'm grateful that I've never had like, oh, this is how I would do it, and like.
No, you haven't been. No, that's good. That's great to hear. That's great to hear. I've only been there once.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Like, it's important to talk about it.
Yeah.
But like only once where I was like I planned it out and I started doing it, and then it was like, oh, I can't do this. I just need to sleep.
Oh, fuck. That's what I was talking about, this city. Like, I feel like a bit of this city.
It wasn't in the city.
Wasn't in the city? Okay.
It was in Australia.
Oh, okay.
And,
even worse.
Even worse. Yeah, that was, but it's like, yeah, like I've thought about suicide a lot in my life, but to get to the point where you're actually planning it out, and it's a different thing. And I did actually reach out. Good. It took me a long time to tell anyone that I did it, but like I did reach out to people and be like, hey, I'm not okay. Like I need somebody
around or do something. Yeah.
So
anybody listening, if you're struggling, reach out to somebody. Like you can do it. The other one that's kind of weird as you get older is like you understand it more. Like as a kid,
what more?
When people do it, you're like, I used like, because as a kid, it's more surprising that you're like, what? Life's great. And then as you get older, you're like, oh, it's fucking long, man.
It's long and it's hard.
It's hard.
And you get every time it's like new ways of having your heart broken, or just like being disappointed, like expectations not being met, or, you know, and that's like a light way of putting it. But it becomes more understandable. But like, the very, very first funeral I ever went to was for a suicide. And I think I was like 7.
Jesus.
And then like the only funerals I've actually been invited to, except for a couple of family members, have been for suicides.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So it seems like it might be
it's in the...
Because some of us are predisposed to it.
Yeah, and it's around, and and like, anyway.
Nice light podcast. Killing ourselves.
Yeah. I've actually got a great episode with my ex-housemate Alex Upatov, talking about like the best ways to commit suicide and how to do it.
I worked with Alex. Alex is like, was he was hanging out with the other Canadian guy, wasn't he, or no?
There's another Canadian guy on the scene called Scott Reynolds.
No, it was because it was Alex and another dude. I'm gonna totally blank on this, so I won't delve into it.
Okay.
On my favorite suicide bit though is probably Chappelle had one about how Anthony Bourdain killed himself.
Yes.
And then he's like, and all you fucking idiots are still alive. He's like, he had the dream job. Everything we always say, we're like, I want to travel and like eat food and like see places. And he was like, fuck it, I can't do this anymore. And then there's some poor motherfucker like working at Target and he's just slogging it out. And it's like, it's kind of, what a weird world.
Yeah. Do you have material on your mum?
Yeah, I have some material on my mom, and
Because one of my favorite bits that I remember of yours, I don't know if I should say it, but like about the and when Facebook asks you to rate the call.
yeah. So I submitted that to a festival recently. I had to do an internet submission, and it's just a needlessly mean one. But I just say like,
it's so funny though because
Oh,
it's so
thank you.
needlessly mean. Like
yeah, and she's a sweet lady overall. She obviously has some of her issues, but
as we all do.
yeah, yeah. I have a couple dumb things about my mom. I don't know. I got a quote from Tamara the other day that I love, that I generally think is a lot of the comedy adventure. Early in his career, he was working with some guy, and the guy came up to him. He's like, "Hey, not too many of those like dick and fart fucking pussy jokes today, kid." And he was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You're new, so you start like from here, from the crotch, right? And then as you you get further up in there, you go to your head, right? And then you come talk to me when you're coming from here, coming from the heart." And I do feel like that's fairly interesting, because if you watch newer comics, and I get it, we all lean on very lewd shit, and then all of a sudden you get stuff that's kind of heady, and then you get that very vulnerable stuff eventually when you're very comfortable with it, and that's the stuff I think is very magical, where you're like, oh man, that's hurt a little, but maybe laugh.
The vulnerability I think is the that's the place to get to. Although I don't think that like, because a lot of my material relates to sexuality and sex. It doesn't necessarily, like lewd, I don't think is like, there are cheap, easy jokes that are lewd, but then I think there is a lot of material still within that realm that, it's not necessarily the easy thing, but like there's, it's kind of like Nikki Glaser. It's not like...
Oh yeah, there's still very good sex jokes, and... I had a girl or I hated when women refer to as girls. Woman after the show yesterday chatted to me about material and whatnot, and sort of emphasized how she's like, oh, there's a lot of sex jokes. And I sort of said, like, especially for international audiences, depending on the level of English, sex is one of the most common awkward interactions that we're all like, oh, that is weird and funny. So that seems to be a fairly deep pool of easy comedy inspiration, but you can get with it some very profound stuff.
Yeah, you can, and I think there's still a lot of female perspective stuff that's still, as long as sex is taboo, as long as like there's still kind of inequality, as long as there's still kind of slut shaming, I think there's still a lot of work to be done, and there's still a lot of content in that area. To be mined for comedy and stuff to say, and like the anxieties around it, and still like the inequality, I would say. Just we still got work to do there, and so that's really where I come at it from. But
I wish you well on your quest, but I've come to a bit of the conclusion, like, our goal is for equality, but I think it's kind of impossible just based off of the way the world works, based on if you're attractive or short or tall, or we're never going to get to an even playing field. But we can keep aspiring for it, but like one of my favorite similar bits is from like Michelle Wolf, where she says the difference between sexual harassment and getting hit on is if they're attractive. So we treat people differently, like that's part of being a human, and I work very hard on like helping everyone and being kind, but we have a whole bunch of things that make barriers to that. It's never going to be even playing field for everyone. It seems like you're coming at it from the ideal that men and women will have a more similar experience, which I think we're closer to than ever.
We're getting closer to it, and I think the more we like break down sort of taboos and shame, that's where it's coming from. Like, there's still a lot of, both sexes, like all the sexes, I should say. There's still a lot of like shame around like body and shame around sex and so long as much as it's a quality, it's also like there's been like women still carry a lot more shame around acting like men do in I'm being very generic in my wording here, but like women still still around the world, like women have fewer rights sexually and freedom wise, so it's like still important to be pushing that area of like women's ability to be sexual creatures and to do the same thing that like no one is judging a man for.
Do you ever think there's a level of like, because we're at a fairly, like, I'm coming from Montreal, coming from Berlin, I think Berlin's even more sexually liberal than Montreal, but I do feel sex and sexuality, you give a lot, so I do think it's helpful to sort of not to shame people, but to, if you're too promiscuous, I think you give a lot of yourself, and I think it can be dangerous. So I do worry sometimes that in our goals to make it where everyone's so free that I think you honestly are a bit too cavalier, and like every time you, especially if you have any sort of physical or romantic or sexual experience with somebody, there's a lot involved, and at certain points we definitely were like, hey, fuck one person, that's it, and then you give up. But now we're kind of like, sleep with as many people as you want, and I think we may have overcorrected a tiny bit in our sexual liberalization, and I do think that treating sex with a little more reverence and a little bit more sacredness might be helpful. Or maybe that's just because I'm not getting laid enough. I don't know.
I feel like that might be why you're saying that. I think I was talking about this a bit at the show last night. It would have been. You left, but so I'm in an open relationship, and it's the first time that I've done it in a very different way. I've always ethically agreed with open relationships.
Yeah.
I think there isn't a finite amount of love that you can have, and I think you can have be in love with one person and then have like loving dynamics with other people and sex, and there's a way to negotiate all of that so that people are protected, feel safe, looked after, and everyone gets more love in general. And I think and so the book that has sort of helped facilitate healthy execution of this so far has been The Ethical Slut, where it's like, why should there's no reason to limit how much sex and love you can share with other people. If you find this one person that you have one thing with, that shouldn't therefore reduce the rest of your, unless both people are like, I only want to have sex with you, that's totally cool. But if both parties are like, we could still have sex with other people and we just negotiate it nicely, that I don't see the reason to, because of you're in love here doesn't mean you have to cancel everything else in your life.
For sure. This brings up an interesting one. So like, I've done poly and I've done serial monogamy at stages as well. It's very hard to figure
poly.
out.
Can you give us details about
don't worry, I was going in there. Because you have to set whatever your relationship is, there's an agreement, some sort of verbally contract that you're like, these are our expectations. And so there's pros and cons of both. I generally we only get one life, so it's crazy to be like, oh, yours are the only genitals I'll see for the rest of my life. That's insane to me.
Right.
And there's Dan Savage, who's like a sex therapist. He's very wise, and he had a wonderful quote where they were talking about married couples, and if they had cheated a couple times, that people are like, oh, they're bad at marriage. And he was like, no, they're actually very good. They were together like 40 years, and they only like fucked 2 other people.
Yeah.
But it's a hard balance, and one of my favorite things is in talking to some of my poly friends, there's pros and cons. Often they'll sometimes be a rule of don't fall in love with somebody else, that they're like, you can go and get your physical needs met, but like, because it's hard balance.
I don't think that's ethical.
Well, ethics is a very wide-ranging and hard to nail down topic of the ethics of relationship. I'm just giving certain examples of things I've seen.
But do you think that's a fair, is that something that in your poly thing that was like, that was your rule, like don't fall in love with someone else?
No, but it was just ones I was like, oh, that's interesting, because like for me, usually if I'm doing any sort of poly, usually for me you have which sounds like you have like a primary partner that they realistically fulfill a lot of your emotional, spiritual, physical needs. But then you're both like, hey, you can go have safe sex with other people you want. I want you to enjoy your body. Some of the challenges are, you'll find that a lot of intentional communities, almost all of them end up as like open sexuality stuff, and a huge percentage of them end up falling apart as a byproduct of love triangles happening. So for me personally, mentally and intellectually, I'm very open to doing open relationships, but emotionally it's very hard. It's quite natural to get sort of possessive and to balance it out, and depending who they're sleeping with, and it's sort of, for me, if I have somebody else, I'm like, hey, you can see other people. It's kind of like, try not to sleep with a whole bunch of people in our community, because it creates so much. It creates so much challenging dynamics.
Yes.
And two of my favorite examples of poly not working that just make me laugh is one is, I had a friend who he was in a poly relationship and had a really hard day. And he was going home. He's like, oh, the person's gonna be there, and they're gonna give me a cuddle, and it'll be okay. And he got home when they were gone, and he was like, oh, they're out fucking somebody else. And so that's can be very challenging. Or another example that I found interesting was one couple, the guy, he was like, "Hey, I don't want to know who you fuck. Just keep that to yourself and be safe." And the girl's like, "Oh, I wish to know everyone you've had sex with." But within that, there started to build a little bit of distrust because one time he came home and he showered in the afternoon, and she's like, "Who'd you sleep with?" And he was like, "Oh, I was just out golfing and I showered." And so it's hard to balance that out. But also conversely, monogamy. There's so many monogamous relationships where somebody is just there because they're too scared to be alone.
Yep.
And that they're not even fucking, and like you both your estrogen, your testosterone, and your oxytocin, they all plummet, and you're in just like a loveless marriage. On a neat note here, that there's a book that I comically enough reference a lot, but I actually haven't read. It's called Sex at Dawn.
Oh yeah. I bought it and then I left it in London.
Yeah.
My mum's sending it over to me, or I'll pick it up in Australia. But I've been wanting to read this. Alex Upatov has read it. It's something that's big in the zeitgeist. Like I'm talking about it a lot too, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, it's so funny because I like reference it all the time, but haven't read it. But so one thing that happens for men is my libido. And I'm also happy to be 36 now because I often joke, had I been in like Berlin or like even Montreal between 18 to 25, my desire to have sex with people in order to validate who I am, partially by, I think, biological pressure, partially by societal pressure, I would have just be dead. Like I would be out trying to do drugs and just have sex with as many attractive people.
I say the same thing about, had I moved to Berlin in my 20s, I would have been found dead in a gutter.
For sure.
Really quickly.
Because it's like so overwhelming. Like as I told you last night, I get outside and there's two of the most beautiful girls there. And my libido's like, you should try to have sex with these people. And they're flirting with me a little bit. Yeah. And then I'm chatting with them and they're like, oh, we tried to date this guy and he sucked. And I was like, oh, he seems very boring. And then they laugh. And I was like, well, I'm so funny. But then the one girl's like, I'm having so much trouble. And I was generally like, for me, if I want to date people I like, I try to find people within the community. So I'm a huge cyclist. So I literally, if somebody's not into biking and ideally specifically like living on a bike, I'm like, it's not going to work. Yep. So I go into bike cooperatives and like into bike communities. And then I find these people where that's a fairly common one. So I was talking to this young girl and being like, hey, what are your passions? Because that's what you should sort of try to be around that stuff. And she's like, oh, I really like drinking. And I literally was like, have a good night. Like immediately, it's like, there's not, if that's your primary like hobby goal values.
It's also like, I don't want to shame her, but it speaks a lot that she was comfortable to say that is her hobby, and it's like, wow, that's
good on you. But just in terms of like, that's where a 20-year-old Dion would be like, I'm gonna just hang out with this girl and maybe she'll have sex with me.
Yeah,
and so I would have been doing drugs and drinking with her all night with the vain hope that I'm like, maybe we'll fuck. And instead I was like, oh, I'm very happy going home. Because like this clearly isn't worth the energy to try to pursue this.
And just not aligned. And there are people that you meet that you can gauge very quickly. It's like, this has got no legs. Like this is going nowhere.
Even though you have legs, this has no legs.
It has no legs. But I would still fuck them. But let's just like not talk too much, get to the fucking, and then say goodbye forever.
But that's my sort of thing when you're talking about our sexual liberation, is like, that seems like such a, and I know personally, like, and I've had it happen, if you ever have really deep feelings for someone and you're hooking up with other people, those orgasms are the worst. Like, which
orgasms? The other people orgasms?
If you have sort of an unrequited love for somebody, that there's somebody you're like deeply connected with, and you're like, man, I wish I was with you, and you're with other people who may be good facsimiles and good entities. Like I've had it a couple times where I've hooked up with somebody and they've been lovely, and all of a sudden I'm like sort of half asleep and I look over and I'm like, oh, I wish you were the other person.
Oh yeah, I've had that.
And so those are the things where I think that we're so open now to be like, everybody explore your sexuality and all your kinks. And I think it'd be healthy to have a bit more of a conversation about how much you give in the pursuit of that.
Yes, I agree with that.
So as I said, I'm not going to ever tell anybody, and I jokingly do often say this, if there were no STDs, I would be doing so much more debauchery. Like I used to live with somebody who's in the kink community in Montreal, and she would tell me about her adventures. I was like, holy fuck. And like one time she had 5 male partners, and she had to move, and all of them came and helped her move, and it was so comical.
I think I've had a friend that recently, a friend of a friend, similar situation. Like my friend went to help her, and it was just like all of these dudes, and they all kind of look the same.
She had a type.
Yeah.
Like, oh, really? Another Brazilian. Oh, another Brazilian. Brazilian. Oh,
man.
another Brazilian.
Yeah. Or like, yeah, exactly. Or like long haired, like metal looking dudes. It's just
Right.
like, okay, cool.
So if I throw on a jean jacket with some patches, I can be in there.
Exactly. Okay, so there's a bit in there. Yeah, I think I'm interested. Yeah, I think it's really important with an open relationship. Like, there's so many different types, right? And my perspective is, I want to know what we're both doing. Just respect each other's time, and ideally, like, you know, we mitigate that whole feeling of needing to go like tit for tat. Oh, you fucked that person. Oh, I'll go and get fucked. You know.
That's like, so funny.
You gotta,
like, oh, you fucked. I gotta fuck somebody this week then.
Yeah. And so removing that,
tit for cock, or
yeah,
I don't know.
tit for snatch.
But that's both. You're trying to get the other genitals.
Yeah. Well, tit for. Exactly. They both have tits though.
That you can. You do whatever you want.
Yeah, nipple play, baby. But I think, you know, to mitigate that sense of like, needing to balance it out, I think the way to do that, from my relatively limited so far experience of doing it this way, is to just, it's about respecting each other's time. And it's like, okay, like for example, that situation of your friend who had a rough day, came home and the partner was gone. It's like, I don't see that happening in my situation, because it would be like, tonight I'm coming home and we're spending time together.
But you don't always know how your day is going to go, right? So that's there's definitely date nights or something that you're like, hey, this is our time where I hang out. You're going to talk to me about your stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to hear about your shows. You're going to listen to how my music stuff's going. But that within poly, there's going to be those unexpected times where you need your rock, and your rock's off fucking up.
And your rock's off, yes.
But conversely, so my point I was going to talk about the sex at dawn is. I think, there's no right or wrong, but it seems like loveless monogamous, like sexless monogamy. And I know so many people who like, and I remember even chatting with my parents, they ended up divorcing, and I like was openly like, are you guys fucking? And they're like, oh, we don't fuck anymore. And I was like, well, that's like, seems foundationally bad.
Yeah.
And it's just hard to like keep, and even for myself personally, there's been a few partners I've been with that within 6 months to a year, I'm like, it's just not like, you need a bit of newness sometimes. And so there's been a few that I've been very attracted to for over a year, but often after about a 6 month, it's just not the same raw passion. So there's an interesting one, and this stuff I believe comes from Sex at Dawn. And then there's another neat experiment that my good friend told me about, and he's got a physiology degree, and he was like, because the male testosterone, it's like, it like fuels especially our sexual energy, and like that like animalistic, like just it's such a useful tool, or just it's such a driving force. And so what happens is when men go for a long period of time without having sex with their partner, and then that relationship ends and they start hooking up with somebody else, literally they talk about how they're like, food has flavor again. And what ends up happening is they usually end up hooking up with somebody and then believing that this person's like borderline their pussy's magic, because all of a sudden like testosterone and libidos return to their life, and they're literally like everything, the colors change. And so often a man will end a relationship and then start dating some random potentially bimbo, and then people are like, why are you so into this person? They're like, they're magic. And like, no, you're just like returning to like a healthy testosterone level. So on a weird note, that this is something that I've been a little more chatty, but I have a sociology degree, and so for a long time I was like, oh, it's mostly nurture, and nature plays less of a role. And as I've gotten older,
mostly nurture and nature plays less of a role.
That was initially my thing. I was like, you can nurture any human to be a very good citizen. And now I'm more that I think that there's a lot more to nature than we'd like to accept, because it makes us less. We have less agency. So some other research they did with rats is they got a female and a male rat, and they put them in a little container, and then the male rat's testosterone spikes, he humps, they have a great time. His testosterone will plummet down, and then they stop humping. If they put a new female rat into the aquarium, his testosterone spikes again, they start humping. They can keep doing this, and the crazy part is if they put like one of the female rats who'd already been in there, his testosterone doesn't change.
Because he's already fucked that one.
Yeah, so there's something in our DNA that, and it's tough, because the stuff that I do like is when I have somebody who I'm very bonded with, there's so much depth and good, and like the sex does usually get better. There's a few people who I've had flings with that I'm like, oh, this was really good. But there's often a sweet spot of a couple of months when you're like, oh, I know where the spots are. I know what they like. They know what I like. And then the coming is great. But so I think the other one, I'm so chatty.
That's okay. I just want to comment on the rat
ahead.
thing, though. I think the rat thing is a perfect example of why an open relationship makes the most sense. You can have this partnership, and if you keep feeding it with, with other interests. Same for me. That like I've had monogamy where I have cheated. I'm not like some massive cheater, but like it does happen, and it's like, and that making not a mistake, but I guess like faltering then puts the entire relationship in jeopardy, and then there's all of this resentment, and it's like that doesn't make any sense. If you're in love with someone, you should be able to like make mistakes and then forgive and move forward, or even just like having like this kind of pressure cooker dynamic, or and if you're not able to pursue all of your, you can't always pursue all of
I was about to say, you can't, everybody that you want to fuck, you can't be like.
But that's also because of consent, right? Like you can't just be, going out and like fucking everyone you want because there's a consent issue. It's like the other person needs to want to fuck you as well, right? Like you're naturally not going to fuck everyone that you want to fuck because it's, there's two deciding factors in there. But yeah, it's just like it seems so logical that in order to maintain a good partnership that you would give each other the freedom to experiment with different dynamics. Like why just have the one dynamic? The rats are a perfect
example
proof.
Of how one partner kind of doesn't give us that same zest for life. We do have a sort of a magical cheat code that I'm always blown away when people aren't okay with. Is flirt is the sweetest thing, because flirt is like the love little taste, like where you just both feel like ooh, because it's like a positive experience for both people. If you have a good flirt, you go away being like ooh, I'm cute, and they go away being like oh, I'm cute too. And so I'm always astounded when couples are like, no, don't flirt with people, and it's like it's so healthy, and there's people very possessive and envious, and for me personally as well, and I think it's part of it is if you have a partner that's very attractive and other people are attracted to them, it kind of makes me be like, oh yeah, and then I'm more excited to go fuck them later because I'm like
because you're like that, like everyone wants some of that,
but I get it,
and I get it, and I get it in this like special dynamic.
You know that Save the Last Dance song? You gotta save the last dance for me.
Okay.
So that literally means like you can flirt with other people, but you gotta fuck me later.
Yeah.
And it sort of talks about, it's kind of like Michael Bublé does a cover of it.
Okay. Okay. That's I do want to loop back around to the thing of like fucking other people in your community. Like I'm getting, so I don't agree with, my partner and I haven't, like I've said it, but we haven't necessarily like agreed on it and had a discussion about it. But like, there's a part of me that's like, if you fall in love with someone else, that's okay. Like that's gonna happen anyway. Yeah. I don't want there to be this like you can't be in love with someone else. I don't think that's fair. And I think with anyone that we're having, like it's gonna happen anyway. And I think anyone that we're having these like loving, sexual dynamics with, like, it'd be great if you're also feeling love there. Like, that's beautiful. Like, have that love. That's great. And just like, it's just all about looking after everybody in the dynamic and making sure that, everyone's expectations are clear and blah, blah, blah. No one's, being like cancelled on because you're with this person, like just, respectful time management. But haven't talked about that, but that's definitely how I feel. It's like, it's not like I think this whole like, oh, we're going to be boyfriend and girlfriend. We want to eventually, maybe in the future, like settle down together. Cool. But that doesn't mean you can't have, love with other people. But this thing about the community thing, this is one thing that we haven't talked about. And I think it is important. And it's one of the rules that like I'm loath to create rules, but I think don't fuck my friends.
Yeah. Well, but your ethics, this is where it's a very slippery slope of whatever your personal ideal is fine, but it's very challenging to navigate. And that's where I think a lot of people just like fall back to being like, oh, we just sleep together. That's it.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of simple and straightforward, but this is where we have some ideals that I think we're not in line with what our biology is sometimes. That I'm like, oh, these are my spiritual. And as I said, personally, mentally and intellectually, I'm like, poly seems great. But emotionally and physically, I'm like it's so possessive, and like there's an angry monkey in here. Like I'm a caveman, and sometimes that sort of energy's in there. And so if like there's a guy who I don't really like, and he's like hitting on somebody who I have feelings for, there is a thing of like, oh, I should just beat the shit out of this guy, and I don't act on it, but it's in there. And so it's very hard to balance that out. And as you said, So there's that term which I love. I think it's called compulsion or something, where it's like you get excited by their sexual pleasure with other people.
Yeah.
And that's theoretically is like the greatest, but I'm not sure, like, maybe I'm just too immature, but it'd be very hard for me, like, oh, how was their cock? And like, oh, is their cum nice? And like, what were their balls like? Or did they play with your ass like you like? And like,
I'm not sure how. Yeah, I think you could ask the questions you want the answers to, but I want to know, like, oh, okay, like you fucked and you like you went out for dinner and you went to see this gallery.
so yours is
like,
more about the date. Mine's more about like, what was the physical?
Yeah, I don't. If I want to know the minutiae, I will ask, but I'm usually just satisfied being able to like fantasize about whatever that looked like. Like, oh, so you went back to her place. Oh, you fucked on the couch. Cool. I'm not like, oh, did you do this and did you do this and did you? That's like, if I want to know, I'll ask, but I don't really want to. I don't need those like that can be their thing, you know what I mean? Like that can be their special stuff. And it's also like it's exposing them as well.
So who
other party?
Who is the ideal person for your partners to sleep with?
Whoever they feel good with.
But so your friend's not cool though.
Well, the thing is with friends, it's kind of like also like the rule of like not fucking comics, not fucking.
But that should be a rule for everybody, by the way. Everybody out there, don't fuck comics.
No, fuck us.
No, don't.
Please.
Please. As I said, I told the other day, I've only fucked one comic, and I'm just trying to avoid it because it's like it's just because it's like such a weird industry where you don't realize you work in the same office.
You work in the same
like,
office.
There's some people I wish I had like a couple of female friends who was once in a while like, hey, have you not come in a while? And they're like, no. And I'm like, me neither. You want to go come?
Want to go come? Yeah.
But I feel like it just, and I've seen it destroyed, and I've seen so many, and especially in the industry where at some point some person says like, oh, I have a different story for how this developed. And then all of a sudden people's stuff is sort of ruined and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
And then you have to sort of pick a side, then you can't book them on the same show.
It's the whole not being able to book. So all the people that I've fucked in comedy, in comedy, we're all pretty good. There's one that got a little bit because of I gave some feedback to them about
comedy or about sex. Both?
About consent.
Oh, sorry.
There was like a consent issue.
Okay.
And so it's a bit weird with them now, but like, yeah, but like in terms of everyone else that I have, like the thing is like there were times where I remember being at a show and it was like, oh, there are 4 people here that I have. Wow. Like, and I was like, oof. And
good
and it's
for
just,
you. And also you shouldn't where you eat.
Yeah, shitting all over. But I stopped and I made the rule. I made the rule at the start of 2020. At the end of 2019, I'm like, no more comics.
Because I shouldn't have come to this podcast.
What was that?
I said I shouldn't have come to this podcast. It's the only reason I'm here.
To hear.
Have sex with Anna. Now I'm off. You can't even. I'm forbidden, but I'm the forbidden fruit now. There we go.
Well, I make that rule, and then
sometimes
sometimes I fuck up.
You didn't at all.
No, but I have like, and I think it's a good starting point. It's like we work together. It's a good starting point to be like, no, we're comics. We don't do this. But sometimes things slip.
On a funny note, talking about, because you said, which is the very vague version of like anyone they want to sleep with. But I've reflected on this and talked with some of my friends. There's sort of a sweet spot for, I would feel uncomfortable if like the girl I had like super in love with, she like went and like smashed with like Jason Momoa. I was like, you fuck Jason Momoa?
That would make you uncomfortable? Wouldn't you be like, fucking yeah, baby?
Well, you kind of want to. There's jokes that like Canadian women, if you fuck hockey players, are like, oh, well done.
Yeah.
But for me, it's funny that I don't think, for me and for a bunch of my male friends, were like, you wouldn't want them fucking somebody like way above you, but you also wouldn't want them fucking anybody like way below.
It's the way below you thing.
The sweet spot is somebody slightly shittier than you. Just slightly like, oh, I respect and like them, but I'm still better.
Yeah, so that is the sweet spot.
But because that's what I'm saying, like we have all these theoretical intellectual ideas of what our sexuality should be, but then we have these fucking meat suits that are like, if we watch like the bonobos are funny because we're like, maybe we can be them, and we are pretty close to them, but also their genitals are disgusting.
Yeah, right.
So I don't, but so there's part of our like possessive and tribal stuff, and that like it's just challenging to navigate these, and then the hard part is the contract of monogamy is super easy. Only these genitals.
It's very easy.
And then the contract of poly has unlimited variables.
Exactly. And so that's why it's a lot of people steer away from it because it's just a bit too much work. And hey, we've already got this socially acceptable format that we can follow.
Yeah.
Doesn't require that much
on a funny note, at one time I was doing poly, one girl I was seeing phoned me up and she was like, hey, and I was friends with the other guy she was seeing, and she was like, oh, he has chlamydia, so it means I have chlamydia, so it means you have chlamydia, and so when I ran into him,
about STDs, okay, yep.
well, they're part of our journey, and like I jokingly say that like bed bugs and STDs, we're amplifying them exponentially, so you're probably going to get one or both in your life. Like they're coming in some form, and like I think almost the entire population has HPV. Like
yeah, at least in the States. I got vaccinated for that when I was a kid.
But they vaccinated you for the ones that can kill you. But there's like a whole bunch of strains.
My boyfriend's just giving me HPV. Cool.
Most likely, but it's like kind of a benign one. There are some bad effects, but that our species loves fucking, and so any diseases or bacteria or infections that can utilize our love of fucking, and now we're traveling globally to fuck. Like if just looking at Corona, like if you have one thing happen, it'll spread super quick. But so the chlamydia one though, when I ran into my friend, it was funny because to him I was like, hey, either I'm angry you gave me chlamydia or I'm sorry I gave you chlamydia. And then you don't know where it came from. And on a funny note, chlamydia is the best of the STDs.
Oh yeah,
you literally take like a pill. Like it's harder to get rid of a cold.
You know what though? It is hard because you can't have sex for 7 days.
Oh yeah, but Jesus.
That's that I have a thing where I don't know if I've had chlamydia 4 times or if I just didn't treat it properly for like 3 years.
Upsell of polyamory, guys. Here we go.
That wasn't poly. Well, I did. That was during my marriage when it was a bit open. But then it was when I moved to Berlin.
Oh yeah, no. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm generally glad I wasn't in these wonderful cities 18 to 25.
Yeah. I'm okay. Like, yeah. I think STDs though. I do have this bit at the moment where I talk about how I recently got tested and I've been tested twice this year actually. Always clean, amazing.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say clean. Healthy.
Yeah.
But
there is a stigmatization of like,
yeah, it doesn't need to.
You're not dirty. But it is hard, and it's always tough if you have any STDs that like it's such a to the build up when you're like, oh, we can fuck, and you're like,
you're like, actually,
here's your risks. Just a heads up.
Yeah. But when I went, what's really cool is like if you test yourself regularly and then everything is treatable. And like, I think if you're testing regularly, you keep it in mind that, hey, be careful with, the issue is like mouth sex. It's very easy to transfer things. People forget that.
Yeah.
But you're not going to transfer, like it's really hard. Actually, my boyfriend told me that he went to get tested and the consultant told him that the only way you can get HIV through your mouth is if you have a full load of cum in your mouth. Wound. You've got an open, but then you need to like massage it. He was like, you would need to massage the semen into your cheeks.
So I don't know why you're into that, but you live your life, kid. All right.
So, but the thing is, everything's treatable. So it's like if you're getting tested regularly, you're keeping the safe sex in mind. But I don't think it's not motivation to not be promiscuous. The hard part is
like condoms are the worst. Like I use them, but like we all know. So it's like one of my ideals for poly would be to try to find people that's like, hey, no, we're all clean here. Like we can fuck in this crew and we're all good. But there's just so many variables of who's out there, what's going on.
Definitely. And then, yeah. It's I don't know. I wanted to quickly ask. So, in your poly dynamic, how many people were in the? It was like how many of you were?
The max person I was dating is any of my poly. I'd usually have like kind of a girlfriend boyfriend, and then like one or two other people that occasionally I would sleep with. And then obviously, if you meet somebody that like the chemistry's super high, and you're like, oh my god, we'll just like we'll leave each other dehydrated and delighted. Then you're like, you're welcome to it. But it's been a while since I've done those. Most of my past relationships these days have seemed to be like a variation of monogamy.
Yeah, all of my relationships in Berlin except for current one, and then like a couple of other small like short periods with other people were all monogamous. And then in my life in Australia as well, there were a couple of things where it got open, and my marriage would have sex with other people but always together. That was only like that kind of open. But have you enjoyed any of the like sexual liberalness of Berlin? Have you been to like?
No, I haven't done any of the sex clubs or anything, and like as I said, I just like, I guess I'm a bit of a prude. I might go because you only get one life to go to try to get to some stuff. I also hate waiting in lines. So a bunch of the stuff they're like, this is the place to go. I'm like, I don't want to wait in line for an hour.
Yeah, no, fair. And that there are some parties that you can like buy tickets and then you don't have to wait in line.
I'm not totally opposed to it. I have a good friend who he's quite wild, and his whole like online presence is just like, he's a bit of a fuck boy, but he's quite talented and it's kind of fun.
He's quite a talented fuck boy.
I think at fucking as well as a talented human.
Okay.
But he's like, his persona, and I've had a number of times I've introduced female friends. They're like, oh my god, I would suck his dick. Like he's just like,
where is he?
I'll introduce you. He's lovely. He's handsome and talented. He's selling out theaters all over the States right now.
Oh, doing what?
Jack, doing comedy.
Doing comedy.
Yeah, he's very, very good. And he's like, and his whole persona is all his online stuff. It's like kind of fuckboy stuff. But it's fun to talk to him about some of his adventures and stuff. And it was funny because a number of times he was like, oh, I got like weird. I'm like, you have chlamydia again. And he's like, no. I'm like, you for sure have chlamydia. And he's like, it turns out I had chlamydia. And I was like, yeah, I know. So, yeah,
oh man,
so
chlamydia. Fuck.
4 or 5. Going quickly back to sort of because this is the hard part, and maybe it's exciting, is as we get older, you kind of hope maybe that you're like, because if you don't put energy into sex, I feel like theoretically you can be more productive. Like there's the example of like Tesla. Apparently he like Nikola Tesla, like was an oddball, but he was also in love with a pigeon at one point. But like,
what, that doesn't counter the fact that he was an oddball. That's hilarious. Yeah, okay, he was an
double
oddball.
That it wasn't a sexual entity. Kind of, he just became like this asexual person and like worked on his super sciencey stuff.
Yeah.
But
sex
the other
does take time.
A lot, and it for men, I know like there's a couple interesting ones of seeing some athletes, because like once you get to the top, your sexual partners changes a lot as a dude. One of the most interesting ones I saw the other day was a little quote from Tupac. And he talked about going to the club before he was famous, and girls wouldn't give him the time of day. And he said it fucking changed, and he didn't like it. That all these girls who couldn't be bought, they're like, oh, you're so cute, you're so hot. And he's like, you're looking at me for the fame, not for who I am.
Yeah.
And so Bill Burr has another bit about this of like the army of whores.
The army of whores.
Hi, Foster.
Yes.
Hey.
Speaking of the army of whores.
Well, we're wrapping up in a second. Recording again at the Wall Comedy Club. Thanks to Foster
Yao.
Yao.
Foster, lovely venue. Shows 7 nights a week, I think, and sometimes 2 or 3 shows a day. So
6 nights a week.
Six
nights a week.
Close on Mondays.
Close on
Sign out
Mondays.
front is a liar.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to print a new one off.
All right.
Don't do it. Good.
So
Army of whores.
Army of whores. But as a man, I think you're like, I sort of reference this, and on one note, we'll talk quickly about porn, and then one other thing, and then I guess we got to wrap up.
Yeah, we got to wrap up. We've got like a couple of minutes. Yeah.
What is I try to not look at porn, but it's one of the few vices that always sneaks back into my life. And I generally feel like it's destructive overall for most of our species. And especially because like the porn is no longer just like, ooh, a titty. Like I have a very good friend from back in the day that I laughed so hard because his girlfriend one time was taking a shit or something. I don't know how, but he was shitting and she was on the computer and his Google search histories was nice tits.
Okay.
And I was so proud of him. I'm like, that's all you look up? He's like, yeah, I just look up nice tits and I jerk off. And I was like, that's so wholesome.
That is so wholesome.
And it's because like you can just see the cornucopia of like so many people. Like I had one friend who had a nice balance where he's like, you can find a site where it's all people who are like, oh, we like doing this. If you like come into us, come and it's great.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like it short circuits my brain where back in the day, we'd have a tribe of like 100 monkeys. So I could see like maybe 10 naked ladies in my life if I was really lucky. And now I can click on the internet and be like, I can see 1,000 of the nicest pussies, vaginas, buttholes, and tits. And it short circuits all of this monkey hide wearing where I have this like.
What do you mean it short circuits it? Like what's
so
the
I have an entity. I feel like I have a personality that's Dion that I've tried to build and tried to be moral and a good person and have some values and what I see is right and wrong. And then there's a thing that like wants to make babies and wants to fight and eat and shit. And when I see the nudity and all the things, it just bypasses all the stuff I've tried to be as a human, and I'm just like,
goes to your animal side. Yeah,
and I don't think it's good overall, and I think that we're pushing it as like, oh, it's wonderful.
My take on porn is, if people get joy from it, okay. I think it's good to good that we have access to lots of different types of sexual activity and that people have, can see that. I think there is definitely there's some issues with body image standards and expectations. I think that can be a part of it, but I think most people are stepping into it with eyes wide open. I think the proclivities, the kink and all of that stuff, it can go very far, but I think people are engaging with stuff that they're interested in. So I don't know, I don't see porn as a vice or a negative thing, but I think it's like everything. It's like, a small glass of wine with dinner is not unhealthy. But if you're boozing up every fucking night, it's unhealthy. So a little bit of porn, cool. But if this is something that really dominates your time, then there's an issue there and it's tapping into something else. So I don't think the existence of porn is in any way problematic. I think ethics within the industry can be problematic for sure. But I think engaging with porn at a healthy, in a healthy way is fine. I don't think it's as bad as recreational drugs or highly processed food or.
I was weirdly about to address that is McDonald's also can feel good, but we know that it's
a little bit of it's
addictive,
okay.
But we have these very addictive things that because your meat suit to get that high level of fat back in the day when me and you were wandering through the bush was unheard of.
Yeah.
So when you eat it, your body's like, dude, this will keep you alive.
Yeah.
And so it's this old technology that can interact with this new system. So I always feel like our biology is so far behind our technology and our culture and the stuff we have access to. So similarly, I don't think we've had a healthy social media is now the new phenomena that we're like, oh, we don't understand what this is or how to use this, and we're very addicted to it, and now it's ubiquitous when it didn't even exist 20 years ago. But because our culture and our technology moves so fast, when it takes 10,000 years for us to really make biological changes.
Yeah, for sure. I guess my perspective is just with any of these things, yeah, I don't know. I'm a bit none of these things seem to bother me, but I understand that they affect other people.
I can tell you're a hedonist. You're it's great. Just enjoy your life.
But social media, for example, I only understand social media as a business tool. I've never really engaged with it as a way to show my life to other people. What? No, it's a business tool. And same with porn. It's porn is something.
A business tool?
Porn is a business tool, yes. And it's also a source of inspiration for it's like going to the library. It's all right, well, what kind of crazy shit can I find? Okay, cool. And then, moving on. But I think you're right for a lot of people that yes, and yes. But at the same time, I mean, everyone, I think it all comes down to education. And I think there's, in general, there's a lack of education at a very base level all the way up through the rearing adults, raising adults, is that there's not enough education around feelings and how to communicate to people and how to communicate your feelings. And if there was more of that, then people would be more aware of why they're engaging with porn, why they're engaging with social media in these negative ways, why, drugs, all the things that we have more and more access to. I think it comes down to people not being educated in feeling and communicating feeling.
Well, I think you got onto something there, and I think I can bookend our lovely podcast with this analogy is because I do think that there are vices, as you flagged, the social media, the porn, sexuality, drugs, food, that there are these sort of vices, and you're like, why are you using this vice? I do think that there are addictive things that if you're not aware of will just control your life. But there was very interesting research with university. You'll often get the one where they talk about, hey, there was a rat, they put him in a cage, and there was cocaine water and regular water.
I love this experiment.
And so he would drink cocaine water till he died. But then another researcher was like, okay, but that rat had nothing to do.
Exactly.
So then it would obviously look for any sort of recreation because it's miserable.
Exactly.
So it does the cocaine water. So what we fail to often realize is that it's a societal space that you have in it. And when you have a place and a purpose, it changes usually what vices you do, because you're like, oh, I'm needed, I'm a vital member of my community, and I feel fulfilled. Because this other guy was like, okay, well, let's build a rat utopia. So he built this rat utopia with all these activities and these actions and these food and these sexual partners.
Never touched the cocaine.
He did touch it. He touched the cocaine water.
It made him sick?
I don't know if it made him sick, but he drank the cocaine water, he drank the regular water, and he opted just to go with the regular water.
Exactly.
Because he was like, oh, I don't need this stimulant.
Exactly.
But so I think where we're at, and I think the issues is that most people don't have purpose. They don't have a quality of life. They don't feel fulfilled. They're scared. They're sad. And so you can
And they
just
feel
jerk off.
alone. They feel alone.
Exactly. And you can feel a weird connection where you're online jerking off to other people fucking, and it's not you fucking, but your brain will fool yourself. And then you're eating shitty food because it gives you a quick feeling of feeling good. And then you're doing drugs and stuff.
Anything
and
to
so,
feel something.
Yeah.
Because they don't feel like they have a
You
community
need
and they don't
community.
feel.
Yeah. So I hope you can have a nice polyamorous community. All right. I think we have to.
We're going to wrap this up. We've got after party comedy happening today at the Wall Comedy Club. Could you tell us how to follow you?
So you can pretty much, if you type in Dion Owen, that's my website, dionowen.com, and then you can find me. It's the only Instagram. I'm Cyclopath Comedy, but if you type in Dion Owen, you'll find me as well. If this gets out before the 12th, I'm doing my hour at Caracas Bar, and I'm very excited. I've been working hard on this. I toured at the Fringe. I've done a couple hundred shows, 6 countries. This is my 6th, and then I have wonderful Tamara as my host. So generally one of the a world-class comic who's very fortunately living here in Berlin. So if anyone's free, we're trying the classic Berlin method of you can reserve for free, but we're suggested donation a minimum of 10 euros. If you're there, check it out. I've worked super hard on it. It's generally some very dumb jokes, but some very jokes a bit edgy and profound that have taken me a long time to work on.
Cyclopath, Dion Owen. Amazing. That has been the episode. It's been a real pleasure.
This is wonderful, Anna. I so enjoy your company. I'm going to give you one. This is such a weird book, Anna, but I'm going to give you one insult compliment. Can I give you one weird insult compliment?
Give it to me.
Okay. I talked to you the other day. As a friend, I was like, I think Anna might be a bit of a dumb hoe, and then I was talking to you, and you're like, oh, I'm performing at a theater in Italian. And I was like, you speak Italian? She's like, fluently. And I was like, you speak other languages? She's like, oh, I speak like 4 languages. I'm like, you're quadrilingual? You're like, oh, I almost have a 5th. And so I feel bad because now I realize you're just a hoe.
Yeah, I am.
All right.
Hoeing all over. That was beautiful. Thank you, Dion.
Oh, God.
All right, guys, that has been Adults Only Comedy Berlin. Thank you so much, and see you next time. Goodbye.